working with? And I don't know, I thought Ben should be answering that question. He said he would in one-on-one discussions outside, so feel free to ask him on which mediation partner you're going to use, but he said he can't do anything on camera because they're all sponsors. All right, this panel is moderated by Mike Evans. I'm going to actually do the introductions because I know everyone up here. Mike Evans is probably the longest tenured person in mobile in one company. He's been at Sega for 8.5 years. Now, if you figure the average tenure in mobile is 9 months, that's unbelievable. You must have like the greatest stock option plan or whatever it is they're doing right. Wilson Kriegal is one of the industry luminaries in the space. He's been at, man, a lot of big companies. I'm sure they'll give you a quick introduction. Probably the most data-driven guy that I know in the industry. Very numbers-oriented, been at GM, CRO for a lot of big companies, successful companies. Sally Liu, she's over at Zynga. She works on Ben's team, so I know she's really smart. Rhiannon is the director over at Shazzam. And we wanted to have a mix, games, not games, non-games. Chandra Hill has been around for a long time in a very senior position at TextPlus. She just moved over to Mobilityware. I consider her to be like one of the sharpest people, probably top 3 sharpest people in the space. But I will never ever go to a USC UCLA game with her because we went to that game and they broke like an 8-game win streak for us, and you know she was jumping in the rain and all this other stuff. So no more tickets for you, Chandra. Okay. So Mike, go for it.
Thanks, Dave. Thanks. So we all want to know which networks we should be speaking to and who's at the exact top of their game. But the degree of choice and the innovation is absolutely staggering. If you couple that with the promises of sales in terms of fantastic CPM or amazing film, the emails that we all love to get, then it's utterly confusing. So how do you figure it out? And how do you build a sustainable revenue stream from a non-paying audience? So, and who do you do that with? Today, our panel have got all the answers for you. But before we kick into that, just to give the panelists an idea of kind of who's in the audience and who they're speaking to, can I have a quick show of hands, please? Who, first of all, is from an ad network, from a vendor? Woo! There we go. Okay, great. So can you put your hands down and cover your ears for the rest of the talk, please? A few secrets coming out here. Okay, so next of all, who is running ads in their app at the moment, of everybody who's left? Okay. Okay, good. Keeping those hands up, please. Can you tell me if you're generating enough revenue to keep you happy? So put your hands down if you're not. Wow, we've got an important job to do here today, I think, panel. So, to kick things off, could you introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about how ad monetization is moving the needle for you, please? Wilson, do you like? Please first.
Thanks. Chandra Hill from Mobilityware, makers of a number of casual card games on iOS, Android, and Amazon. Ad monetization is really the engine that keeps the company going. We are all mobile, and ad mediation or advertising is the bulk of revenues, in addition to some in-app purchases through some of our games.
Sally Liu, so from Zynga, and our games are the largest casual gaming out there, and so ad monetization to us is to figure out how we monetize that 95% of people who don't pay. So we have monetization on both Facebook and also on the mobile apps as well. And then mobile is definitely growing a lot. And so our focus has been going through like, how do we increase the fill rate, how do we drive the CPM up, and then how do we make sure that user experience is the best.
Fantastic, thanks.
Rhiannon White, I run advertising product management at Shazzam. Advertising makes up half of our revenue, so it's extraordinarily important to us. I always feel like the odd one out at these things because we're obviously not a game and I'm on the product side as opposed to the yield and ops side. So if I have a slightly different take on things, you'll have to forgive me.
That's perfect, that's what we need.
Wilson Kriegal, I'm a CRO at PicsArt. We're basically the second largest photo and editing app after Instagram with 60 million monthly active users. And I did a decade in gaming with
So, first of all, casting your mind back, so think all the way back to 2014. What ad tech innovations for you have really kind of rocked the market? And who do you think that we need to look out for in 2015? Do you want to take that one, Rhiannon?
Sure. So I guess the biggest things for us in 2014 were native, the rise of native, and the different forms of that. We actually spent a lot of time very successfully experimenting in mobile retargeting, which is not really an ad tech innovation generally, but in mobile, it was certainly the first time we were able to do that. And then thirdly, actually, I'll give a nod to Charlie, who's here. Hey, Charlie. A lot of non-in-app innovations like beacons have been really interesting for us, and so we're doing a lot of work in that space.
Okay. So from the gaming side, what about kind of for you, Chandra?
It was really about video for us.
Yeah.
That is where we felt like there was real demand coming into the market, and we're seeing nice fill, and we think that the future for video looks bright, and that's definitely where we're placing our bets in 2015.
Okay, great. That's good. So within any kind of rapidly growing space, there's a fair degree of M&A which kind of kicks off merger and acquisition. So if you think about it, Flurry and Brightwell being bought by Yahoo. Then you've got Oprah being bought by
Colin.
That's it. That's exactly it. So how do you think this kind of space is going to be affected by these large established players buying up some of the kind of the smaller players? What does that mean? Wilson, do you want to take this one?
It means a slowdown in innovation, poor account management. It means a lot of politics and doubling down on people reaching out to you who don't know that you already work for their company. You know, it doesn't mean a whole lot, and it means a lot of shitty earnouts for those who sold with earnouts. You know, it doesn't actually often benefit the publishers. The reality is the big players can innovate fast enough to move the needle in a way that matters to their shareholders, often our public.
Right.
And the smaller guys are growing their $0 to $50 million P&L at a rate that reflects that there's a technology innovation and demand behind that the big players are still obligated to jump on. The challenge is that publishers have no loyalty. The reality is most publishers, and because you never know where the next boom of innovation is in the mobile world in particular, you don't know which one is your next 200 million MAU partner. Right. And so publishers will go where the money flow, where the opportunities are, especially in the early stages. Yeah. So big companies buy companies for technology and for the portfolio. It makes it really challenging, whether it was the mobile Twitter acquisition, Opera. And Opera's bought a lot of companies over the past several years, and I don't work there, so I don't want to speak for the employees, but it's challenging. And the challenge for companies our size, with tens of millions of DAUs, some of them hundreds of millions of MAUs, is that account management, technology, innovations, and scalability all are extremely important to us. Mm-hmm. And so M&A is not always a great circumstance.
Can I put the opposing view?
Of course you can.
Because a lot of that does ring true for me and from our side, but also the sheer proliferation in the ad tech industry is incredibly hard to deal with as a publisher, and the overhead is huge, and the sheer, everyone out there wants to put their SDK in your app, and it's just not going to happen, right? So sometimes the consolidation from our point of view is actually quite helpful, because we end up being able to work with partners who before were borderline, wasn't worth putting an SDK in, but actually I was quite interested in what they had to offer. Whereas if they consolidate, then you can actually get a little bit more. For example, the Mopub Twitter acquisition has actually been really great for us, and we're seeing a lot come through that we're excited about, and that we wouldn't have, just trying to split between those two wouldn't have worked for us. So
yeah, it's a great point. I mean, we worked with Mopub early on when we were at OMG Pop, and we were part of their rise and our rise. And it's a double-edged sword, just like concerns with transitions of management. Yeah. Reestablishing their infrastructures. I mean, any company gets acquired has to then kind of go on the platform of the acquirer. Yeah. And so it creates delays in technology innovation and in their process. Ultimately, there are a lot of benefits and upsides in retargeting capabilities in their sales force and potential volume of those publishers and advertisers. So it's sensitive. It depends really on the acquirer and their capability. It varies on every single acquisition. I've seen poor ones and fairly decent ones.
So you're saying that kind of since kind of Mopub and Twitter have come together, that their account management has dropped, you know, in terms of the fact that...
Luckily for us, no.
Yeah.
Because we're a big player and we have a very strong relationship with the management team.
Right.
And so I think that they were built, and the reason why we stayed with mobile so long was that the account management and relationship management was at the heart of how they innovated. And then ultimately delivered value to their publishers.
Yeah.
And I think that's, you know, as part of when you talk about who's the best ad networks or who to work with, that's a really essential part of who and why you should work with people.
Okay, great. So just thinking about Yahoo for a second, Sal. You know, Yahoo have obviously, I kind of wonder whether they're up to something at the moment, you know. So they've got Flurry for analytics and incentivized ads. They've got Brightwell for video. They've got Gemini and Yahoo's own kind of native network. What do you think they're doing?
I think they're trying to take over the whole world for advertising, but I think for us it's kind of good and bad. So because you have this one SDK that can take care of all the components in the for us. But the risk is that I was just talking to Yahoo yesterday, is so now you have Brightwell. So does that mean that you're going to just block Brightwell buying from other DSPs, or are they going to just own that apartment themselves? Well, luckily they say no, because they still have some apps out there not able to take the Yahoo SDK, so Brightwell can still buy it from different channels and stuff. So yeah, I mean, just like it's convenient for the publisher just putting one SDK can take care of everything, right? So like Rhiannon said, SDK is always an issue. So when it comes to Android, you have the bank account, the concerns that oftentimes you can do whatever you want to do. So I mean, it really depends on what your app is, what your genre is, what your purpose is. That you can choose in between. Sometimes just one SDK can take care of everything. That's great for you.
Yeah. Okay, great.
And I think the biggest part of it is how are the M&A transactions impacting the mediation layers. Because a lot of us will work through some kind of platform that supports optimization, RTD, marketplace, in a way where, you know, if you don't want to have 20 add-ons people, the technology is meant to, you know, kind of create efficiencies around that. So what happens when there's all these acquisitions in relation to, you know, your middle layer? Is it now more competitive or less competitive? And it is an issue of SDK because, you know, file size, integration, SDK updates, you know, those are always a conflict of interest with the product team, with the roadmap, with planning. And then against all of these, the point of, it's not about who's best or not best, it's what works best for your business relative to your goals, and how do you measure that? You have to quantify these things, right? So, you know, an SDK is meant to imply X amount of accreted revenue, not a shift in revenue. It's not like, let me put this revenue into this bucket now, we have a new partner, but well, how does it accretion of revenue? And so there's a challenge there in trying to measure what an SDK is really worth. That's really a big part of the job.
And it's not like if I had $1 for every time someone says to me, it's just a few lines of code, it's so lightweight, I would at least be able to buy a nice meal and San Francisco. Yeah, because it's not the implementation. Please, devs who are here, if you take away one thing, it's not the implementation, it's the maintenance. As Wilson was saying, it's that every month we release every 3-4 weeks, ship on Android, iOS, and Windows. That means my QA teams are burning cycles, testing SDKs that are in clash with each other. You know, I could be building features for my users on that, as opposed to checking that the SDKs don't, you know, like kill each other. I've had SDKs that do things like turn off the microphone. It's Shazzam! Why would you turn off the microphone? You know, and you're like, oh, I didn't realize you did. Yeah, think about it. So it's like the SDK thing is actually a really big deal, and it's not the implementation. It's not at all the implementation. It's the ongoing overhead in terms of development and QA more than anything else.
And often the over-promising and under-delivering. Because not every partner is going to work for every publisher. And you have to understand where there's intersection and overlap and how your audience fits best with what they have in the market to offer you.
Fair enough. Well, let's just talk about SDK for a second, because it seems like it's a hot topic, definitely. And I certainly know from a Sega perspective, whenever I kind of raise the matter of getting an SDK into the game, the devs kind of roll their eyes. I don't think anybody really loves SDKs. So for you guys, in terms of, and I'm sure you get approached by a lot of networks saying, you know, we want you to put the SDK into the game, into the app generally. What tips are balanced for you? What kind of things will make you say, okay, all right, I'm going to put your SDK in? Are there certain things that you look for when you evaluate that? you want to take that one, please?
Sure, there are a number of things. One, are they doing something truly innovative that I can't get anywhere else?
Yeah.
As the panel before has mentioned, everyone's working with everyone else, and can't I just connect to you via MoPub or Google? And if I can get that done, then I will.
Yeah.
But for a lot of folks, video does require SDKs often, although that's changing a bit. I look at the size and scale. How big is their network? How big is their sales force? What kind of demand do they have, not only in North America, but really globally? I ask for references, always. I want to know someone who's my size, who's been where I've been, and has used them, and has something nice to say.
Yeah.
So always ask for a reference. And then if you could find someone else in your network, get another opinion as well. And then guarantees, right? You are putting a lot on the line. Your QA team, your product management team, you have to ask a lot of people to do this work.
Yeah.
And so you want to be absolutely sure that you're going to get back the effort tenfold at least, right? So we ask up front, what are you willing to sign up for? And we approach it from a partnership. We're not going to put anyone in a situation where they're not going to make money either, but we're also not going to do all of the work and cross our fingers and hope for the best.
So how many SDKs are you actually running in the game? Do you have like a kind of like a max limit at all?
We have quite a few. I'd say generally some of the points that have been mentioned, like Android does tend to sort of limit what you can do between libraries, method limits, those sorts of things. You kind of hit that ceiling sooner than you do on iOS. But we have a few that we use, and again, they've all come out of either they're doing something interesting, or they all are, but then also size and scale.
Right. Okay. Good. What about yourself?
How many do we run?
Yeah, how many do you run, and what kind of tips are balanced to getting those kind of SDKs into your app?
Chandra summed it up really well.
Yeah.
The other thing we look for is, we don't want to be the first time that SDKs we implemented. But no, you wouldn't believe how often I'm talking with a great, fantastic ad tech partner at the moment, but who don't have a mobile SDK, and they don't seem to get why it's different. Surely you can use. We don't have anything other than mobile. That's what we are. So we don't like being first. In terms of the number of SDKs, we don't have that many. We're actually pretty restrictive on it. It's a big barrier for us.
Yeah.
Anything that can add to the weight of the app can slow down recognition, and obviously recognition is the core purpose of what the app does, and we measure and monitor our recognition rate. That's the single most important metric in our company. So for us, anything that affects it by milliseconds is a big deal.
Right.
So we're quite rigid on the SDK side.
Okay. So let's just think about negotiation with some of these kind of networks now. We obviously all want to have some solid floors in place. Can you tell me a little bit about how you approach this with the networks and what you guys can leverage in terms of when you're doing that negotiation? Sally?
I think similar to Chandra just said, is that you bring the scale and then ask them what they can do, and it's all about partnership and partner, not just like short-sighted to say, okay, what can you get in right now, like 100K, 50K, whatever guarantee.
Yeah.
But we want to see is a guarantee of the fill rate and guarantee of the flow rate. So that you want to see have a consistent long-term partnership to like grow business on both sides together.
Right. Can you give us any insight on the kind of flaws that you look for at all?
It really depends on how big the geo distribution of the app, and also depends on how big your DAU is. So definitely in the US, we know that video, for example, the fill rate should be pretty decent. So we're looking for like 80 to 95% depends on the app. Also, like in English-speaking country, UK, Canada, and Australia, those rates are pretty high. So we tend to ask a little bit higher rate. EU, probably a little bit less, but still decent. So that in the rest of the world, depends on the app genre. So we'll have a different flow rate. So it really depends on the geo distribution and also the scale of the data.
Right. Okay. Thanks. Wilson, anything you want to add to that as well?
I think obviously every post out there has a different product type. That is proliferating or growing differently. You have an arbitrage model, it's all viral. If you have an arbitrage model, you intrinsically have a different approach to how you're running your business. We're seeing nearly 8+ million installs a month. They're all organic, past 5 million organic installs. Like I don't have to arbitrage anything, so I don't necessarily look at the fundamentals as the same as maybe an RPG game that is or a casino game where the arbitrage is really essential, and whether it's on the ARPU of the in-app purchases or the advertising. So. there's fundamentals around, understanding what you're trying to achieve, and the SDK or the negotiations are just a function of that formula. At the forefront is like, what are we trying to do? What are our goals? What does it mean for our users? What's our business model? The negotiations are fairly easy because half of the emails that you get are full of shit. The other half, are people who have enough experience to be able to enter into a conversation to answer your questions. And the fact is simply, which is like, there's geo, there's volume, there's ad types, there's media types, there's the technology, does it run through mediation? There is a checklist, if you will, in that funnel, in that formula, where, if they can't even answer 90% of those questions for you in an email outright, people are like, let's have a 15-minute call. I don't have time for your 15-minute call. Here are my 10 questions. It's black and white. It's extremely simple. You have to know how you make money for a living and what it takes to actually move the needle internally to your business against the goals that you're achieving, whether it's increasing video, whether it's native releases, whether it's CPE or CPD against video, whether you're trying to do earn-based things. Know your own fundamentals. Be transparent about what it is that you do with your partners. The negotiations come very easily, and it's very quickly transparent who can do what for you, because they either can or they can't. And most importantly, like the floors and not the floors. I think again, it depends on the app type. It depends on what you're trying to achieve. Very few companies can, we're all large, but most companies can't afford asking for floors, can't afford asking for minimum volume purchases. We're all trying to basically lift in all, whether it's your international CPM on the banner, your video, like we're trying to lift all bullets at all times. And that's the goal, right? Again, it's about accrued revenue upside, not transferring revenue. And so it becomes very hard at our scale when we work with so many partners to actually find partners who have that much more value or who are worth integrating. Because it's like, to your point, I can give you 50 grand now, but what does that mean to me? Like, are you just adding 2, 3, or $4, $5,000 a day? I already made that CPM with another partner. So Phil, it's always an opportunity with the long tail. And then when you're dealing with new ad placement types, whether it's native, then you're dealing with, Phil becomes really interesting or important on a global scale because mostly it's US. Video has been a tremendous product over the past year for a lot of applications. We don't run video. I mean, you see video in Instagram. We're like content, real-time consumption, fast-paced. So each product will have circumstances where there's certain media types, ad types that you just cannot run. So half of the partners out there are also not viable to you. The negotiations are fairly easy because if you know your business model and what you're trying to achieve, and you know what you can and can't do and what the formula is around to achieving that, you just put that in front of them and they either can or can't answer it.
If I could add one more thing. I'd ask one more question of the partner, and that is, what are they doing differently in the market to bring in new demand? Which I think speaks to just lifting all of the boats. Because you don't need one more partner who's doing another CPI-based, sort of session out there in the market. You need someone who's changing how they source demand and making that mobile friendly. And that's the one thing, if I can, impart some advice.
So just talking about advice, what advice would you give to the networks, to the sales guys and girls who are programming you? How do you want to be approached? We've got sort of some people here today, so it'd be good to hear your kind of lowdown on that.
Please don't book a meeting with my CEO and tell him that you're going to make us $100 million a year. Because then I have to spend a long time with you and then with him explaining why that's not going to work.
Okay, let's just have a quick chat about native. So native is often cited as a big area of opportunity. It's certainly been growing as well. Can you tell us a little bit about what you are defining native as within your apps?
I don't think but I think she's making a great point. There's a lot of ad networks out there. There's a lot of ad products out there. The reason why you're not getting your business is because you're not doing your work. You're not doing your job. First of all, there's so many young account salespeople out there that the white template emails are just atrocious. But know our business, know our metrics, understand the context, understand the scalability. Don't tell us we're going to make you so much money in the first email when you know nothing about our business. And the biggest flaw that most salespeople have in this industry right now, because they're hiring so many salespeople because of the booming industry of advertising, is that you've got young kids who don't do their fucking jobs. And their job is to know what I need, and what's going to work for me. And there's just a lack of training from these companies to make their salespeople actually be viable for them versus undermining the credibility of their own business and their brands. And I get bombarded by emails, as they must do as well, on a weekly basis by young ad salespeople who don't know that we're already talking to their management, who don't know that we're already in their sales force planning cycle, who don't know that we already rejected them, and then who tell you about how they can make all this money, but they don't know what ad types you're running, they don't know your funnel, like they don't even do the homework to understand the mechanics around how ultimately they will make you money. And so that makes you want to not work with their company, period.
So who's had the best approach? So if you could name, say, a couple of networks where the sales guys come in and it's been a great job and he's really understood your business, which networks are they?
You want names?
Yeah, I want names.
I mean, they're the ones I work with today. I mean, I think Millennial Media over time has done a tremendous job because of their teams. I think Mopub had done a tremendous job over that time, and during the Mopub era, there was a lot of other partners we could have looked at. And it's just not an ad tech alone, but whether it's push notification partners, or it's the same principle, which is like, don't approach the challenge becomes with the new guys video. I mean, iColony had done a great job. We interacted with them at a very early stage, and so it's hard for them to understand the scale at which you're dealing with. iColony early on in 2011, 2012 when we came out, and we just released Draw Something, for example. We were generating tens of millions of dollars a quarter in ad revenue. If somebody comes and says, well, I can add $250,000 to your P&L, you're like, listen, I'd love to work with you, it's just not going to happen. And then you spend the next year hoping or grinding it out with them to try to figure out whether or not you can have a relationship, and ultimately they grow large enough to be able to be a great partner. But the challenge is really the context of your product, of your demo, of your geo. In Mobi at scale, on a geo basis, and AdMob. Google and AdMob is, Google's a very big partner of ours. AdMob I've worked with for obviously an extensive period of time. The challenge with companies like that is when they merge too many of the departments, they no longer can provide you a personalized service to help you understand how to better yield manage. And so you end up losing the intellectual capital that you need from your partners. I want to know how they're making money. And I want the partners we work with that we share to tell me how that happens. I want to know which partner out there they're hearing on a mediation standpoint is really killing it for somebody in my vertical. And so once these consolidations take place and AdMob merges inside Google to another department, like suddenly the guy sitting next to you, he's like, oh, I can't run you this report, or I can't tell you how to yield optimize. And so you're like, dude, you're fucking useless to me then. Right? Because I need your intellectual capital, what's going on in the market, to do a better job on my end. So it's the challenge of the bigger players.
All right. If I can mention, you mentioned a lot of big players, and I think a lot of folks are probably already in those names.
Yeah.
But if I can mention two that I thought really did their homework or they had a lot going on that I didn't realize just from the initial pitch. One was AirServe, Video SSP. They came in, did a full presentation. They had competitive analysis within my app. They showed me that someone was running something that shouldn't have been in the app. I harped on that a little too long, but I took the point, right? They had really done their homework, came in, and I thought it was pretty impressive. The other one, I'll give a shout out to Dave, is LoopMe. So they have a lot going on with data. But my point is, don't be afraid to take a chance on someone who is new, especially if you're not a really big publisher, right? It's often easier to grow with someone and establish that relationship than it is to sort of go into AdMob and say, hey, what about me, right? You want to have the opportunity to establish that relationship and grow along with them.
Perfect. Okay, good advice. Thank you, Jess. So let's move on to native now and consider native. Area of opportunity, definitely. Some people are using it, some people are not using it. Can you tell us a little bit about how you're defining native, what it is within your app, how it works, and some of the kind of current limitations and areas of opportunity that you see? Rhiannon, you want to take this one? Sure.
So native is a big deal for us. We define it two ways. There seem to be two major trends in the industry around native being highly bespoke to that publisher. So you couldn't buy it on an exchange, you would have to create bespoke creative for that placement. It's highly integrated into the app. And then native in the sense of kind of coalescing around the Facebook, Twitter type native units where the ad unit the ad call pulls through the elements and then you assemble them in your app according to how your layout and how you want it to look. We've been experimenting with both. We've found both very successful for us, but to the point Listen was making earlier, like in the US and in the very developed markets. So it's kind of it's an interesting story for us in that we're throwing a lot of energy at native. We find our own native products very successful and they drive a huge amount of our advertising business. We're finding the kind of the building native networks or exchange demand very interesting. We're out there as being a very early partner with Facebook and Audience Network, which we've found brilliant. But at the same time, it's really important not to lose sight of that the Humble banner actually drives a huge amount of revenue for us in the non-big market. We're everywhere. We're a big app. We're very global, and it's really important to us what happens in Russia. And they don't care about native. They really don't.
Yeah.
So it's one of those things that it's exciting, but it's important not to get. Sometimes I have to pull my exec team back a little bit and say, actually, we don't want to go all in on native because we still need the other stuff. That's as simple as it goes.
So you touched on Facebook as well. So just thinking about kind of Facebook's audience network, can you tell me a little bit about, maybe Sally, you can take this one, about how you work with them and how their CPMs are in comparison as well?
So we tested Facebook audience network in one small game because we don't want to be the first one. No game team want to be the first one to adopt them. So we tested in a small game, and the CPM actually had pretty significant comparing to the regular display. I would say probably around like 40–50% higher, but it could be just because it's just on the testing stage, so we never know that when it comes to scale, would that sustain. But in terms of user experience, I think it's pretty decent for us. But again, you have to take it up to scale and then really see how it performs. So it's pretty unknown for us.
Okay. We work with them as well. I think it's very interesting and can become very exciting. I mean, when you look at the principle behind it, both on the supply of volume that they have, as well as the ability to target and retarget, and the fact that 1.3 billion people have a Facebook account, and that allows them for a tremendous amount of data retargeting. To the same point, both on native, as we use them for native, and native is never going to replace the current P&L that we have. Hopefully within the next 12 months it may. But I think over time it's very interesting. And it becomes more around, and they say themselves, we're never going to fill your inventory. So outright they're very upfront about that. But it is a gradual process, just like native is a huge opportunity. And again, it depends on your product. I mean, we're very heavy photo driven, so we're much more of a feed-like environment. There's a lot of hashtag categories, et cetera, et cetera. Like native is not for everybody. Keep your interstitial, keep your banner, keep your video pre-roll. Like for some people, that is a gold mine. We can't do video pre-roll, we can't do really video in the app, and a banner doesn't really fit well. So we're hoping this year that native is going to kind of override our highly profitable single banner business model that we have. Yeah. But what is exciting about native as well is video and native, video and banner, and the feed, like you see on your Facebook network and the Yoda feed. And companies like Interactive are doing something that are really innovative around your ability to see a portion of the video if it's enough in the screen. And then it follows you as a story across the different touch points of your application. So if you've seen 50% of it, instead of re-seeing it from the beginning, you go into another section of your app, you'll see the other 50% of it. And so I think creativity that way with volume is about user experience. It's about the context of the product. But native, from my perspective, to be efficient, because I can't try 20,000 things. I look at who the biggest players are, what best practices are, where the money is flowing into native today in terms of ad formats. Yeah. And you look at the biggest, you look at Twitter, you look at Facebook, you look at the Tangos of the world, communication apps, Viber, and you say, okay, where is the bucket of the money going today when it comes to certain native formats? And you say, okay, why create my own that nobody's buying into when there's a fairly large amount of money flowing into certain formats already that are not IAB standards, but they're known to users. And ad formats that have become known or adopted by users are an important part of the user experience as well as performance of advertising. And so you don't have to reinvent the wheel or invent the wheel to start adopting things in early stages that can be very successful for you if you're already looking. Again, Facebook billion users have been exposed to native ads. Yeah. Right. So there are certain formats that people see every day and forget that they're native ads or don't even look at it differently than just another ad. Sure. And that's an important part of kind of the approach to. Again, maybe let's not try this quirky ad formats that nobody's buying into that I'm not even sure is going to work when millions of dollars are going into this particular one that fits well within my UX UI. It is UX UI design, product relationship situation that you have to work really closely with your team on.
Yeah. And the other, we have a direct sales force as well. And so I completely agree around we can see coalescing standards even if it's not IAB. we are going to have the ability to direct sell those native units for our sales force, our direct sales force pretty soon. Our bespoke native stuff works quite well, but it's even better if they can on a plan say, and hey, guess what? You're already advertising on Facebook. If you want to run in newsfeed, we have a newsfeed, it gets this many impressions. Just give us the same assets. It makes it really easy for the client, which in turn makes it easier for us to get their business.
Because outside the game, remember, most people aren't doing CPI. And so you're thinking about brands, advertising agencies who their entire job is to manage budgets and never lose a contract with that multi-million-dollar budgets because that's how they get their bonuses. So they want to buy into what's already adopted. So again, if they're buying into Facebook, are they going to buy your quirky ad even if you're at scale, or are they going to buy the same ad that they're already allocating to that they've already sold to their creative director and to the brand is a viable ad with actual measurable CTR metrics behind it that's been accepted or that are proven? Nobody just on the advertising side, just like us on the publisher side, wants to make anything. So whether it's sponsorships, whether it's native ads, whether it's cost per view completion, like all these take time to evolve and migrate, evolve in a way where adoption and confidence takes place, at which point volume follow.
Right. I want to add on that too. It's like, so Yahoo has one. I mean, Facebook has, but nobody has a really solid spec that talk to each other. So it's like, do you want to follow the Facebook spec or do you want to follow Yahoo spec? It's just really confusing for the publishers at this moment. I mean, for us, especially that we don't have Facebook feeds, we don't have any stream content going, so we just have to find a very odd space, such as putting a concept in there. So it's really hard to choose in between and then think about how the fill rate is going to be, right? Since it's customized, is this going to scale? Is it worth it to do this to give it all? Yeah.
That's a challenge with native is that there are no standardization. It's early, it's very US, and it's not yet really fully well executed on the mediation layer side. And so now you're talking about separate SDKs. And that becomes a very sensitive topic of like, well, why run separate SDKs when you already have mediation, and then you push a lot of pressure on your mediation partners to bring on partners who have fill and ad types that support your goals as a company. And that's where the relationships with the mediation partners become very important. If you have very strong relationships on mobile with Twitter and you can influence the roadmap, that goes a long ways to helping grow your business, and that's where long-term relationships, as when you're small or big. Again, we started early on ownership out with MoPub, and today it carries on to the relationships inside there.
Okay, sure. All right. Well, we talked a little bit before about some of the sales approaches. Now, let's put yourself in a scenario where you sign up and you put the SDK in. And let's just think a little bit about how some of those kind of account management teams work. Tell me a little bit about kind of who rocks in the space, how you work with that account management team, and when you work with an account management team, how they're able to kind of drive the needle for you a little bit.
It's an interesting relationship of pressuring them with the notion that they can lose you as a partner. To work with them towards yield optimization. Like at the end of the day, you have to have your ad ops team always on these conversations and these account management. My ad ops guy spends more time with my partners than I should, but he knows what we're trying to achieve. And the goal is always about why are fills not higher? Why is the CPM not higher? What can we do? If we give you this much guarantee of volume, can you give us a floor at this price point? And you're constantly trying to refine and tweak where the relationship is going. You share roadmaps in terms of product. They share their roadmaps in terms of clients or technology. We talk to most of our partners on a weekly basis. Q1, January drop in CPMs and impressions. Everybody's on the phone with the ad networks and the mediation. Like, where's my money? Where's my bill? Because what happens through mediation in the marketplace is a lot of your fill suddenly goes from a premium network to long tail ad mob, and you're like, wait, my 50 cents CPM just went 20 cents. Like, ad volume, those are significant, drastic, shifts in revenues. And then you're scrambling to figure out who can pick up the slack. And so, because you're trying to constantly bump that overall floor, regardless because of the dynamics and seasonality. There's always listen, you go to one part and you say, this guy's willing to take 20 million impressions a day at 50 cents. What are you going to do? What can you do? And so there's this kind of dynamic where you're not trying to bamboozle or blackmail anybody, but everybody has to know where the rest of your partnerships are, so that they can hopefully yield you something more meaningful.
Okay. So when you do churn from the network, can you tell us a little bit about why that happens, and provide some advice for both developers and networks themselves? Maybe we want to kind of interject on that one.
generally you churn because the fill and the revenue's not there. You know, there's someone who can do a better job. I mean, I think what I like to tell people is we run a meritocracy. You earn your position, right? It's not about personalities, and you're all lovely people and we'd love to hang out. But the ones I work with are great. No, but at the end of the day, you know, I have a number I have to hit, and depending upon how important that partner is, I may share some portion of what I expect them to do to help me get there. So if we have to part ways, it's almost entirely because they weren't hitting the number, or they've had a disastrous SDK release, or they've just done something that's caused a hit to my star rating, or I lost downloads. That is a surefire way to
if she loses credibility inside her company at her role because your product sucks, you know, I mean, we're on the front line, right? And ultimately, our companies are about our product, our users, and their experiences. So yes, we're in the business of being profitable, scalable companies, but primarily and foremost, we're in the business of delivering great product experiences for our consumers. So we are always at the front line of no's inside the company. We don't need it. You know, what does it do for our users? And when it doesn't work well, it's always our asses on the line. So she clearly is a very nice and affable person. So she maybe there's, you know, I'm a lot less. But it's the reality, which is we take risks, you know, that we ultimately have to be accountable for. People love us when we make them a shitload of money, but the moment an SDK goes wrong, the moment the numbers go down, the moment there's, you know, CS tickets around experiences because an ad's not loading, an ad's not, you know, reducing in size, because it's crashing the app, because it's spammy, it's us.
Yeah, I don't think people realize how much internal advocating we do on their behalf. Let's try something out. Let's go to bat for them. You know, present our case. You know, it's not. We don't control the entire life chain, right? So we have to. You know, we have bosses too. We have product managers that we have to, you know, make happy at the end of the day. So.
And even the product managers, we have engineering teams.
Right. There's always something you have to answer to.
Like it's not, and it's right. Every time we lose credibility because of that, it makes it harder for the next one.
Absolutely.
And it makes the bar go up for the next time in terms of trying to get something new done.
So probably the most important question today now that I've got here for you. So GDC is coming up. There's lots and lots of happy hours going on at GDC. Network selection itself is critical at this point. Who throws the best parties?
I feel Wilson could answer that.
You know, I'm infamously well known to not do lunches with my partners and not do parties and not drink with coworkers. So I am definitely the worst person to answer that. Sounds good. But they have done a lot more than me, hopefully.
Our dinner's on Monday night. GDC opening night at Julian's for about $350. So
there we go.
That's
the one. That's the one. Yeah. Although I hear there's some amazing one at Mobile Congress, so whoever's going there is going to have a good time. All right, so mediation. Let's have a quick talk about mediation. For Sega, having access to 100+ demand sources on Mobilityware Exchange is a cornerstone of our ad monetization strategy, and it drives a significant amount of revenue as well. Tell us about some of your experiences with programmatic marketplaces and what it means to your strategy now. Sally, do you want to kick off on this one first?
Programmatic to us is still kind of new. So like, I know that the market is trending that way, and we're trying to catch that flow. And just like some of the infrastructure is just not ready. For example, like Mopop's UI is not ready yet. So, but we just run a campaign trying to do the programmatic, and then just like going through so many troubles to talk to DSP, talk to the vendors, talk to all these different parties just to make the things happen. So I only wish that infrastructure is there that very soon. But I mean, for Zynga, we do have a very aggressive goal in 2015 to go programmatic. So it's definitely on our radar, and then definitely trying to head that way.
The demand's not necessarily being hit either. We moved fast in that space. We worked with Nexus on that a lot because they were so strong in the non-mobile programmatic RTB world. And for a long time there was like not a lot going on. And then we started to get some really good direct programmatic deals coming in. We're finding direct programmatic is looking really healthy and positive for us. And we've actually seen Q1 RTB has helped even out that traditional Q1 slump for us. It's been a bit of a lifesaver, but it's not the demand is not necessarily there yet either. So lots of people are talking about it, and we're getting, I think on the agency side, they all have programmatic in their 2015 objectives as well, because we're getting a lot of calls at the moment about it. Can you do it? But it's not quite. People talking about it, they know they want to do it, but I don't think they know how.
Sure. Okay.
So I'm quickly going to throw it open to the audience. I can see we're running kind of short on time as well. So are there any questions that you want to ask to this panel here today? Anybody?
We've bored you into submission.
Yeah.
They just want to eat lunch.
It's always bad to be between people and food.
Just a nice round of applause for this panel. I do want to say Mike, Chandra, and Wilson are on our board as well. So we also have a LinkedIn group. If you're not in that, it's only for publishers. There's no vendors in that. If you have any questions on what ad networks or MoPub versus Fuse versus AdMarvel, you can ask that in there and you'll get plenty of feedback. Also, our dinner is opening night at GDC, which is Monday, March 2nd. It's a free event, but you can only come if you're a pub.